law enforcement drone was circling a pathway near a midtown Anchorage apartment complex on a Thursday evening when its camera focused on something that clearly shouldn't have been there. A pillow, pale against the darkness inside a storm drain. Officers approached the location, knelt, and raised the cover. Dried blood marked the edge, and beneath that pillow, 4 or 5 feet below, lay the body of a 21-year-old woman who had been reported missing 4 days earlier by the man she had married 8 months before. Her name was Saria Hildebrand, and the grim calculation behind this case is that she had remained there roughly 100 yards from her own front door, while, throughout that entire period, her husband was assisting strangers searching for her. She had not been hidden there haphazardly. Surrounding her, detectives recovered bedding, a pillow, a sheet, a blanket, and a pair of tan military gloves. Along the nearby trail stood a brand new 96-gallon wheeled trash bin, marked with a revealing reddish-brown stain. The gunshot injury was above her left temple. Anchorage police arrested her husband later that same night, the 10th of August, 2023. By the following morning, prosecutors charged him with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and tampering with physical evidence, while he remained held on $500,000 bail. To truly understand who Sarah Barney was, you must examine the decisions she made well before she ever reached Alaska. Saria Barney was born in Idaho and raised in Utah. She graduated from Hillcrest High School in Midvale and had deep family ties to the small Sanpete County community of Mount Pleasant. Her mother Meredith gave birth to her at a young age. Because of that, they shared an especially close bond, close enough that Sarah regularly called home during even the simplest errands. Walking the dog, driving to work for a shift simply to chat. She was employed at a midtown Anchorage restaurant named Bread and Brew. She walked her dog through University Lake Park, holding her phone against her ear while her mother remained on the other end of the call. The image her relatives described was of a young woman who stayed active, outgoing, and steadily creating a future. Above everything else, she had chosen to serve as a soldier, working as a combat medic. She first enlisted with the Utah Army National Guard, before later serving in the Alaska Army National Guard, and relocating north had been an intentional decision. Alaska offered the opportunity to prepare for the position she wanted without waiting for an opening back home. She pursued that goal with determination. She wanted to care for others, and she had selected the toughest, most direct path to accomplish it. Consider for a moment what that responsibility truly involves. A combat medic is the soldier everyone depends upon when the absolute worst unfolds, the one who runs toward the injured while everyone else seeks shelter. Sarah had volunteered to become that person. She had committed herself to it twice, once for her nation, once for her state. Those who knew her remembered someone kind, humorous, and overflowing with energy. Her mother described her as remarkable and said that after her death, listening to one story after another from people whose lives Sarah had influenced brought an unexpected comfort amid the deepest grief, and she was preparing for her future in the most optimistic, ordinary ways. She had purchased decorations for a celebration. She talked with her friends every single day. She remained close to her mother, and she was eagerly counting down until a family visit only weeks away. Meredith intended to fly north and experience her daughter's new life. None of those reflected the decisions of someone planning to vanish. They reflected the decisions of someone creating something. Remember that because the man she had married was soon going to ask an entire city to believe she had simply abandoned all of it, she had also selected a husband. Saria met Zarius Hildebrand during Army basic training in 2022. He was a Kentucky boy with a difficult beginning in life, circumstances that would emerge much later inside a courtroom. He entered foster care as a young child and, at 8 years old, was adopted alongside siblings by a woman named Paula. He entered military service by age 19. By 2023, he served as an active-duty cannon crew member with the 2nd Infantry Brigade Combat Team of the 11th Airborne Division, stationed at Joint Base Elmanorf-Richardson in Anchorage. They married in Utah on the 29th of December 2022 with Sarah's mother and stepfather attending. During the new year, the newly married couple relocated north together. She followed him to Alaska, weaving her own ambitions into the relocation. The medic program, the new beginning, the party decorations, the dog. 8 months afterward came his 21st birthday, the 5th of August 2023. It started quietly before becoming serious. A drink inside the apartment. Then they headed to Dave & Buster's for several additional ones, 5 or 6 beers by his own later account. Then harder liquor afterward. Shots, mixed cocktails with names unfit to print. Drinks kept coming throughout the evening until they headed to another location, where a bouncer denied him admission because he was plainly too intoxicated to enter. By the time they finally called it a night, according to the statement he later provided investigators, he was in rough shape. Not hostile, not trying to start trouble, simply exhausted, wanting nothing except to get into bed and sleep it off. Sometime around 2 in the morning, the group got into a rideshare and returned home. Friends had spent part of the evening with them. Sarah, by every account, seemed completely fine. She was not suicidal. She was not experiencing a crisis. She was a young woman returning home after celebrating her husband's birthday. That drive home is, as far as the public record shows, the final occasion anyone besides her husband is known to have seen Saria Hildebrand alive. After that moment, only one person's version remains regarding what occurred inside that apartment, because the other person never had the opportunity to tell hers. So, let the timeline speak. Between approximately 2:12 and 2:24 in the morning, several screenshots appeared on Zaria's phone. They had been forwarded from Zarius' own device, exposing his infidelity completely. Messages exchanged with a woman named Cheyenne back in Kentucky, along with proof of communication involving other women as well. Imagine receiving that during the early hours of your husband's birthday. Those images illuminating the display, the slow, nauseating realization of precisely what they revealed and what your marriage truly had become. At approximately 2:40, Saria attempted to call a friend. The friend did not answer, and at 2:48 a.m., a nearby neighbor awoke in alarm and called 911 after hearing what sounded like a gunshot. Motive and gunshot separated by 8 minutes. Compared against that timeline, the husband's account leaves an empty space where the critical minutes belong. He claimed he had blacked out from drinking. He insisted he remembered nothing after leaving the bar. He said he awoke later that morning, wearing only his boxers with absolutely no memory, and began searching for his phone. He discovered the screenshots revealing that his wife now knew everything. He said he went to talk with her and found her already dead, a single gunshot wound to her head. He woke wearing his boxers. He found the screenshots. He went to confront his wife and discovered she was already gone. Yet he maintained he never heard a gunshot, and he insisted he did not know whether he had fired one. How do you awaken, remembering the boxers, the phone, the screenshots, yet forget a gunshot inside the very same room? Let me know in the comments whether you believe a blackout can truly happen that way. I read them, and on this one I genuinely want your thoughts. There was another detail the phones would uncover about that morning, and its ordinary nature makes it chilling. During the hours following the gunshot, while Saria lay dead inside the apartment, her husband's own device remained active. Web searches, social media. The prosecution said he was scrolling through his phone, viewing pornography inside the very rooms where his wife's blood was seeping into the mattress. Later that same day, he searched for something different as well. Firearms, specific brands and models. A man, prosecutors argued, contemplating firearms on the very day one had taken his wife's life. By late morning, a message began making its way into the world from Sarah's phone. If the gunshot was the crime, the text became the fracture in the narrative. At approximately 10:45 that Sunday morning, a message was sent from Sarah's phone to her co-workers at Bread and Brew. She would not be coming to work. One co-worker responded that she needed to contact the owner personally to cancel her shift. The response came back saying she did not have the owner's number, although she did. It was stored inside her phone, and her co-workers knew she had used it previously because she had called before to report being absent. The owner later confirmed that his phone never received a call. Whoever was typing those messages remained inside that apartment wearing Sarah's identity like a borrowed jacket, yet they failed to realize it never truly fit. The deception was too polite to be hers, and too unfamiliar with her own routine to belong to anyone except an impersonator. There was another issue, and it was even worse. Her husband had informed police that Saria walked to work that Sunday morning, leaving her phone behind inside the apartment. But a phone resting on the counter cannot send messages to your boss. Faced with that contradiction, Zarius denied writing the texts. He could not account for how they had been transmitted. He simply offered no explanation whatsoever. That became the first loose thread. Once investigators started pulling it, the entire account gradually unraveled in their hands. While that borrowed identity was calling off work, a trail of receipts stretched across Anchorage. Later, investigators determined that same Sunday, Zarius completed several purchases. At a Fred Meyer, he purchased fresh bed sheets, a mattress protector, hydrogen peroxide, and an unused spray bottle. At a Lowe's, he purchased a 96-gallon wheeled rubbish bin. Read like a shopping list. It becomes a cleanup kit and a container. Surveillance cameras recorded him moving through every stop, standing at a self-checkout station, completely unbothered, purchasing marinara sauce and a sports drink during the same ordinary trip. A young man appearing completely ordinary while something unimaginable waited for him back home. The prosecutor later stood before the jury, pointed toward one of those recordings, and described him standing in the checkout line, utterly undisturbed by what he had done, and by what he was at that very moment still actively doing. Callous, she called it, calculated, selfish. Throughout the early hours that day, the phone data revealed the identical story from a different perspective. He was not remaining still with his grief. He was traveling more than a mile around the apartment during those early hours, moving repeatedly back and forth, performing the slow physical task of making someone disappear. He later admitted visiting the drainage area twice that day, first to prepare for it, then to execute it, and he never reported his wife missing. Not that morning, not later that afternoon, not even that night. Nearly 36 hours went by before Anchorage police accepted a missing person report on Monday. His explanation was that his concern had grown gradually, that he went to pick her up from work that evening, discovered she had never arrived, then drove around the neighborhood, called hospitals, contacted her parents, and even phoned the jail. He said he delayed notifying police because he believed he would locate her himself, and everything would prove to be a misunderstanding. Then he called Meredith Barney in Utah. He told his mother-in-law the story about walking to work, the hangover, and the phone left behind. Meredith responded the way a mother would. She boarded a plane. She and her sister arrived in Alaska within the day, met with police, and devoted themselves to the search for her daughter. Almost immediately, however, something about her son-in-law disturbed her. He was, she would later testify, extremely paranoid and unusually rigid. He appeared determined to remain close beside her, and he also seemed intent on guiding her away from particular locations, places she quietly remembered, intending to return to them afterward. That became the clearest line the prosecution would eventually draw, and it deserves careful consideration. Where is she? What happened? When will we find her? Those were the questions everyone who cared about Saria kept asking. Her mother, her friends, her co-workers, an entire military community that had begun rallying around a missing soldier. The city responded. Police searched. Fellow service members searched. Volunteers swept the trails in surrounding neighborhoods, dozens of them during a single day, following the very paths around University Lake Park where Saria regularly walked her dog. Her husband posted the missing flyer on his own Facebook page and urged people to share it. He walked those same trails beside the volunteers. Everyone kept asking those three questions. Everyone except the one person whom the state would argue never had to ask because he already possessed every answer. Meredith recognized that something was wrong almost immediately, and she was far from alone. As she and her sister continued searching, they noticed exactly where Zarius wanted and refused for them to go. He offered explanations. He found reasons to avoid helping in certain areas, and the two women, grieving, terrified, and far more perceptive than he ever realized, quietly remembered every place he guided them away from, privately planning to revisit those locations later. A mother carrying out detective work on her own son-in-law while searching desperately for her daughter. Another detail from those days would later be placed before the jury by the prosecutor like a heavy stone. Before Saria's body had been discovered, while she remained officially listed only as missing, Zarius asked her mother which keepsakes he should give the family. Perhaps he proposed Saria's childhood baby blanket and her wedding ring. He was discussing keepsakes belonging to a woman he still claimed to believe was alive. He was deciding which memories would remain after her death while assuring her mother, face to face, that hope still existed. Inside the apartment, meanwhile, the physical evidence was steadily strengthening against him. When detectives initially entered, the home's only bed had been reduced to a bare mattress cover, while a fresh set of brand new sheets rested folded on a nearby table. Then one detective requested permission to inspect beneath the bed, and Zarius refused. He claimed there were embarrassing items underneath. He insisted his wife could not possibly be beneath the frame because she would never fit. Imagine standing there as that detective. You are searching for a missing woman. Her husband is preventing you from looking beneath his own bed, and the explanation he offers is that searching there would be too embarrassing. If you had been that investigator, what would the very first response out of your mouth have been? I suspect we'd all arrive at exactly the same conclusion. A search warrant would soon uncover the actual truth. The trial began during June 2026 in Anchorage before Judge Peter Ramrin. It lasted approximately 2 weeks. Dozens of prosecution witnesses stood against only a small handful called by the defense. Under that warrant, the apartment surrendered its remaining secrets. Beneath the removed bedding, the mattress had been saturated with human blood, soaking through into the carpet and the wooden bed frame itself. Investigators applied chemical agents designed to expose blood after someone attempts to wash it away. The room illuminated, revealing more inside the bathtub and more spread across the flooring, the lingering imprint of a cleanup that had never completely succeeded. Yet the forensic center of the case ultimately rested upon distance. The state's firearms and toolmark analyst testified before the jury that the fatal shot had been fired from an intermediate distance. It was not a contact wound with the muzzle pressed directly against the skin, but instead from approximately 6 to 12 in from Sarah's head, most likely around 6. The medical examiner guided the jury through the 5 recognized manners of death: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or undetermined, explaining why this particular wound did not resemble a typical suicide. According to the analyst, the bullet's path also angled slightly upward. That distance became the central battlefield because, based upon the state's evidence, a truly self-inflicted gunshot to the head generally produces a contact wound. This was not one. Prosecutor Brittany Dunlop presented the point to the jury as clearly as possible. Had the barrel been pressed against Saria's head, she explained, both the wound and the resulting blood spray would have appeared significantly different, and they did not. She reminded the jury of another important point as well. Being blackout drunk, she told them, does not excuse a man for what his own hands have done. The defense, headed by Lacey Brewster, never attempted to portray their client as blameless. They acknowledged the lies. They acknowledged concealing the body. Their entire case rested upon one single word: manner. Nobody challenged that Saria had died from a gunshot wound to the head. However, whether that gunshot represented homicide, suicide, or a tragic accident remained, they argued, legitimately uncertain. And where reasonable doubt exists regarding the manner of death, they told the jury, there is reasonable doubt about whether anyone caused it whatsoever. Daubers, Brewster argued, should not be confused with murder. It was a measured defense. Everything depended upon that gap, the distance between what he had undeniably done afterward and what could genuinely be established about the instant the gun fired. Yet, the state had one final question prepared, and its simplicity made it devastating. If Saria had ended her own life, or if the firearm had discharged accidentally, then a gunshot echoed through that apartment during the middle of the night. A neighbor across the street heard it clearly enough to awaken and dial 911. So how, the prosecutor asked, did the husband, lying directly beside her, only feet away in the same bed, fail to hear the very sound a stranger across the road detected through the walls? You cannot be near enough to become the grieving witness while also being distant enough to have slept through the shot. Not both. And the prosecution urged the jury to observe which answers he chose for particular details, and exactly when, because, they argued, his memory was remarkably selective. He remembered the boxers, the phone, the screenshots, the precise process of moving a body, yet the trigger, the firearm, and where he had even found it. Only regarding those did his memory suddenly disappear. Zarius Hildebrand testified in his own defense. He said he wanted to correct years of falsehoods. He admitted the affair. He admitted the drinking. Then, with steady, unwavering detail, he admitted concealing everything afterward. He described pulling his wife's body into the wheeled bin feet first, dragging her by the legs because the container stood taller than the bed. He described placing the blood-soaked bedding over her afterward. He described driving to the store for a mattress topper, then returning to the apartment and relocating her once more. He described lifting the manhole cover, lowering her into the storm drain, then replacing the cover before walking away. He said he had even brought a can of gasoline, intending to burn the bedding before ultimately deciding against it. He described his state during those hours as emptiness, self-hatred, and disgust. He said he understood, even while doing it, that his actions were monstrous. Yet he carried on regardless, methodically, throughout most of an entire day. While a message sent in his wife's name informed her workplace she had simply called in sick. The prosecution challenged him over precisely that. If he had awakened to discover his wife already dead, innocent of the shooting, terrified and overwhelmed by grief, why not call for assistance? Why not dial 911, contact her mother, or reach out to anyone whatsoever. Why purchase a bin and a bottle of peroxide instead? His explanations continually returned to panic and shame. He was frightened. He said he understood how everything would appear, and so, instead of reaching for the phone, he lifted his wife's body. What he refused to say was that he had killed her, and that was the point that mattered most. He also refused to say that he had not. When asked directly during cross-examination whether he had pulled the trigger, he replied that he did not know. When asked whether he wanted the jury to believe his wife had fired the gun, he answered that deciding what the jury believed was not up to him. Two witnesses defined him more clearly than any piece of evidence ever could. The first was his adoptive mother, Paula. She cried on the witness stand before the jury had even entered the courtroom. She spoke about a son who had served as a role model for his younger brother and who had never, in her experience, displayed a violent temper. Then, during cross-examination, the prosecution made one quiet point. Throughout every phone conversation she had shared with her son after his arrest, he had never once mentioned missing his wife, not even once. The second witness was a fellow soldier, First Sergeant Toby Horry, who visited Zarius in jail following his arrest. They had not discussed the case, Horry said, until Zarius told him he wanted a message delivered. "I hope this thing isn't recording," he said, "because I did what I did." Horry, disturbed, looked back toward him. Zarius was smiling. The sergeant reported the remark through his chain of command. On the 25th of June 2026, after approximately 9 to 10 hours of deliberations, the jury returned. They found Zarius Hildebrand not guilty of first-degree murder. They found him guilty on 2 counts of second-degree murder. And they found him guilty on 2 counts of tampering with physical evidence. In the end, the distinction between first-degree and second-degree murder rested upon premeditation. The jury was not convinced he had planned the killing beforehand, but they were convinced he had killed her. He rose and received the verdicts, with almost no expression across his face. The same emotionless composure he had shown in the surveillance footage, the same composure he had displayed during the search effort, and while testifying on the witness stand, he now faces a prison sentence ranging from 15 to 99 years. His sentencing is scheduled for the 23rd of October, 2026. Of every exhibit presented before that jury, one was almost impossible to bear because of its simplicity. On Sarah's own phone, detectives discovered a note she had written back in April, several months before her death. It was not about abuse, and it was not about terror. Instead, it was a quiet list describing how unloved she felt, how he no longer called her beautiful, how he had become less affectionate, and how he simply was not the man he used to be. A young wife searching for words to describe something that had slowly faded between them, never imagining how that story would finally end. She should have enjoyed decades filling that phone with countless other notes. She had trained twice to save lives. She called her mother while walking her dog. She purchased decorations for a celebration, and she counted the days until a family visit that instead became a funeral in Mount Pleasant, Utah. Fewer than 9 months after her wedding day, her mother refused to let her disappear a second time. Meredith Barney traveled from Utah for hearing after hearing across nearly 3 years, sitting inside that courtroom so everyone present would continue seeing a daughter rather than merely a case file. She said her only wish was for people to understand how remarkable her daughter truly was, and that hearing how many lives Saria had touched brought comfort to her heart. So let that remain the lasting memory. Not the drone, not the storm drain, not the receipts, and not the man who distributed a missing person flyer for the wife he had already concealed. Let it be the combat medic from a small Utah town who spent her entire brief life walking toward the people needing her most. Hazelyn Stomps entered the world in Oregon in 1953. During her high school years, she met a man named Jerry, and they quickly began seeing each other. He was several years older and was enlisted in the military at that point. Then, shortly after their relationship began, he was deployed to Vietnam. Jerry and Lynn remained connected by exchanging letters. Once he eventually returned home, they were married. The pair established themselves in a small town called Corvette, not far outside Portland. From that moment forward, they enjoyed a peaceful, dependable life. Throughout the years, Lynn and Jerry experimented with many different jobs. They handled landscaping, cultivated Christmas trees for sale, and generally accepted every opportunity they discovered to earn an income. Residing in a rural region, there simply were not many opportunities for dependable, lasting employment, so they mostly depended upon themselves. Jerry was a passionate fisherman and hunter, which additionally provided opportunities to make extra income. For a while, he even served as a minister, delivering sermons inside nursing homes. Eventually, they welcomed 2 sons, and after those children matured and established families of their own, Jerry and Lynn became grandparents of 4 grandchildren. Around then, the pair began seriously considering retirement, eager to devote additional time to their family. By that period, their financial circumstances had transformed completely because Lynn inherited nearly $2 million from her father. She and Jerry purchased several rental properties throughout Portland, and they also started a farm where they raised livestock. Therefore, by that time, they were preparing to sell part of the farming operation, requiring constant attention, hoping to finally retire and ease their workload. However, those dreams were never destined to become reality. On February 6, 2009, at approximately 8 a.m., 2 men were traveling toward Corbett along a roadway winding through the forest. As they approached a bridge crossing a small river, they spotted a red pickup truck parked beside the edge of the bridge. Moments later, one of them noticed something moving beyond the guardrail and realized it was a person's hand. The men instantly got out of the vehicle and hurried over. On the embankment stretching from the bridge toward the riverbank, concealed within the tall grass, they discovered a woman who was obviously in urgent need of assistance. She was covered with bruises and cuts, yet she remained conscious. As soon as she noticed them, she pleaded for them to contact the police and explained that both she and her husband had been assaulted. When paramedics and officers reached the scene, they recognized her immediately. It was Lynn. She was unable to stand and was barely able to remain conscious. Yet before she was transported to the hospital, she still succeeded in explaining what had happened there. She and Jerry had been attempting to sell their boat for several weeks. Earlier that morning, they had been driving to meet a prospective buyer named Dave, who had discovered their advertisement online. After reaching the meeting location, Dave walked toward the river with Jerry, and that was where he attacked him. When Lynn stepped out of the truck to find out what was happening, another man suddenly charged toward her, caught her, and hurled her from the bridge. She crashed into a concrete support underneath and lost consciousness for some time. After regaining consciousness beside the riverbank, she realized she was unable to stand. Jerry had disappeared and the 2 men were gone as well. Despite the pain, Lynn began pulling herself toward the roadway, hoping somebody would notice her. It took nearly 2 hours simply to reach the guardrail again, and only then did the 2 passing men notice her. She was rushed to the hospital where doctors discovered fractures in her pelvis, ribs, and tailbone. While medical staff treated her, police started searching for Jerry and began combing the surrounding woods. However, the soaked ground and rugged landscape made everything extremely challenging. They found no useful footprints or additional evidence that directed them toward the correct location. Even so, officers and search dogs continued working throughout the forest, while detectives waited for Lynn to recover enough to hopefully provide additional information. By then, she had been moved to a hospital in Portland, where doctors kept her on strong pain medication. Although they preferred she not receive visitors, Lynn insisted that the police be allowed inside. Once they entered, she shared additional details about everything that had occurred. According to Lynn, during the weeks after they listed the boat for sale, they received hardly any phone calls or messages. Then a man named Dave contacted them and immediately began insisting he was prepared to purchase the boat as quickly as possible, since it was worth $40,000. Because of Dave's behavior, Lynn and Jerry remained cautious. Rather than giving him their address or towing the boat to some unfamiliar location, Jerry chose to meet Dave beside the river. David had explained that he was a passionate fisherman, so Jerry proposed they discuss everything he wanted to ask while spending time fishing. That morning, Lynn and Jerry headed toward the bridge at approximately 6:30. Soon after they arrived, Dave drove up. He and Jerry spoke briefly beside the truck while Lynn remained inside because it was raining. She couldn't hear what her husband was telling him, and several minutes later, both men walked down toward the river. After they disappeared from view, Lynn glanced outside and noticed the rain had nearly ended. She decided to step out of the truck. But the moment she opened the door, she heard Jerry shout for her to run. Before Lynn could fully grasp what was happening, another man appeared, somebody she had never seen before. He was holding a gun, and Lynn panicked. She immediately started running, but he moved faster. He caught her halfway across the bridge and hurled her over the railing, sending her into the water after she struck part of the concrete structure during the fall. Lynn provided police with descriptions of both men, but she remembered only their general appearances. Regarding the vehicle Dave had arrived in, she hadn't seen the license plate. The only detail she recalled was that it was a gold-colored pickup truck. Police created composite sketches of both suspects and distributed them across nearby towns, but nothing came from it. The search operations weren't yielding results either, and detectives slowly began questioning whether the case was more complicated than it had initially appeared. They started believing the entire boat sale had merely been a cover, and that somebody might have had entirely different reasons for abducting Jerry. After interviewing his relatives and others who knew him, police discovered Jerry was an extremely blunt, direct man who frequently spoke exactly what he believed. That had caused disagreements on multiple occasions, and detectives began considering whether somebody might have been carrying a grudge against him. They also learned that back in the early 70s, Jerry had been arrested after making threats against President Nixon during a discussion with an acquaintance around the period Nixon intended to visit Portland. They also explored the possibility that he owed somebody money, but Lynn maintained Jerry never borrowed money and never even used credit cards. Even so, before long, investigators gradually leaned toward believing Jerry might have been hiding secrets and that his wife simply wasn't aware of the complete picture. That suspicion emerged after Lynn carefully walked them through all of Jerry's activities during the days preceding the attack. She explained he had been handling ordinary daily tasks, visiting the bank to pay a bill, ordering supplies for the property, stopping by his favorite cigar shop, and later driving to the farm where they raised animals. According to Lynn, he remained there overnight before returning home the following day. That final detail immediately captured the detective's attention. The farm was located in a neighboring state, and reaching it required Jerry to cross the bridge linking Oregon and Washington. However, when police reviewed surveillance footage from that bridge for the relevant day, Jerry's vehicle never showed up anywhere in the recordings. That raised a major warning sign. It indicated Jerry had misled his wife and spent nearly an entire day somewhere different. Detectives began questioning whether Jerry had a hidden business or perhaps even an affair. They returned to Lynn at the hospital, but she insisted Jerry would never be unfaithful and claimed she had no clue where he had actually gone that day. Once again, investigators ended up with nothing. Several days had already gone by since Jerry disappeared, yet they still hadn't uncovered a single solid lead. The abductors hadn't reached out to anyone in Jerry's family either. There were no ransom requests, no threats, absolutely nothing. Everything seemed profoundly unusual to police, and they couldn't escape the feeling they were viewing the entire case from the entirely wrong perspective. They chose to examine Jerry's movements during the days preceding the attack far more carefully. Detectives began questioning people familiar with him and collecting surveillance recordings from the locations he was believed to have visited. To their astonishment, they reached a troubling conclusion. Nobody had seen or spoken with Jerry during the 5 days before the abduction. Then they received the forensic report from the scene, and it made everything even more puzzling. Investigators failed to uncover a single valuable trace. There were no footprints belonging to the abductors, no tire marks from their vehicle, and essentially nothing indicating anybody else had been present. Another unusual detail was that the IT team found no evidence whatsoever of this mysterious Dave. No messages, no telephone calls, nothing. Yet somehow, Jerry must have arranged that meeting with him. Altogether, those discoveries were steering detectives toward a deeply disturbing conclusion. Perhaps there had never been any meeting with Dave at all, but they still couldn't dismiss one crucial fact. Lynn had sustained severe injuries after falling from that bridge. Therefore, police decided to question the doctors who had treated her and ask whether anything regarding her condition appeared unusual. To the investigators' surprise, the doctor explained her injuries didn't truly correspond with her account of events. According to Lynn's version, an unidentified attacker pushed her from the bridge near its highest point. Yet, based upon the injuries she actually sustained, the doctors believed she must have fallen from a considerably lower height. The detectives observed something additional. As we know, Lynn had outlined Jerry's movements before the abduction. However, just like the farm account, police couldn't locate anything supporting her claims. In reality, after examining surveillance recordings from multiple locations around town, they observed Lynn driving Jerry's pickup alone, and Jerry wasn't inside the truck. After reviewing everything, detectives concluded they needed to investigate the case from an entirely different perspective. Therefore, they obtained a warrant to search Jerry and Lynn's home. The first detail investigators noticed was the striking difference between the various rooms. Certain areas were obviously cluttered, whereas others had been scrubbed almost flawlessly. Based on their appearance, the cleaning had happened quite recently, with the kitchen providing the strongest indication. Chairs had been set upside down on the table, beside various cleaning products. Near the sink sat numerous empty soda cans together with several drained energy drink bottles. Everything indicated that somebody had devoted an extremely long time to meticulously cleaning the residence, and that whoever was responsible had relied on energy drinks simply to continue. Detectives also made noteworthy discoveries outside. Throughout the property, they located several burn piles, which by itself wasn't unusual in a rural area like theirs. However, within some of those piles, officers noticed pieces of bone. Without laboratory testing, though, they couldn't determine whether those bones came from a human or an animal. What investigators uncovered afterward was even more disturbing. Inside a metal trash container, they discovered a pile of ashes containing what appeared to be part of a human spine. Another significant piece of evidence surfaced inside the residence. Police recovered Jerry's favorite revolver. For the people who knew him, that seemed incredibly unusual. Every one of them explained Jerry never went anywhere without that firearm. He carried it everywhere, whether he was simply visiting the store or traveling to church. Yet somehow he had supposedly left it at home that morning, before leaving to meet an unfamiliar man deep in the woods to sell a boat. There was another unusual detail involving the revolver as well. Inside its cylinder were 2 spent shell casings, and Jerry's relatives said that was equally suspicious. According to them, he would never have left empty casings inside the weapon. The revolver was submitted to the laboratory alongside the remaining evidence, where experts discovered blood spatter on the barrel matching Jerry. The pattern indicated he had been shot at point-blank range, most likely in the head. Regarding the bones, specialists confirmed they were human, and DNA analysis proved they belonged to Jerry. Meanwhile, investigators uncovered another lead. Surveillance footage from a nearby store captured Lynn purchasing bleach and cleaning supplies. That same bleach was later recovered inside the house, and it was evident somebody had already used it. By then, detectives were nearly convinced of 2 facts. Jerry was dead, and he had died long before the alleged kidnapping. Secondly, his wife had been directly involved in his killing. What investigators still couldn't understand was why she would choose to murder the man she'd shared nearly 40 years of her life with. Lynn remained hospitalized at the time, and detectives returned to interview her once more. After cautiously feeling out the conversation, they finally stopped pretending and told her directly they didn't believe her account. They repeatedly urged her to explain what had truly occurred, but Lynn continued maintaining that everything unfolded exactly as she had described. Every effort to make her reveal more accomplished nothing. Nevertheless, by then, investigators possessed sufficient evidence linking her to the crime. Consequently, Lynn was arrested while lying in her hospital bed. When her sons and other family members learned the news, they believed the detectives had completely lost their minds. None of them could accept that Lynn would murder her husband. To their knowledge, the couple had never experienced any major problems. However, after the family discovered what evidence investigators had actually collected, they gradually began changing their opinions. That became especially true after detectives uncovered what appeared to be a motive. As they investigated Lynn's background more thoroughly, they unexpectedly uncovered something significant. She had accumulated a substantial amount of credit card debt, more than $55,000. As we already know, Jerry despised borrowing money and refused to use credit cards out of principle. Detectives concluded Lynn had secretly accumulated those debts without his knowledge. If Jerry had ever discovered them, he would have been enraged, something that could easily have triggered a major confrontation. In addition, investigators discovered Lynn had quietly been loaning substantial sums of money to their sons, further worsening their financial circumstances. Therefore, detectives increasingly leaned toward one conclusion. Financial problems may have been the reason Lynn chose to eliminate her husband. Either Jerry uncovered the debt and she killed him during an argument, or she realized he would eventually uncover the truth and decided to murder him before that occurred. Based upon all the evidence and witness testimony, the killing must have occurred on February 1st, 5 days before the incident at the bridge. Detectives believed Lynn shot Jerry using his own revolver, then spent the following several days disposing of the body by burning it in sections across the property. Meanwhile, she began scrubbing the rooms where evidence such as blood spatter might still have remained. Because she drove Jerry's pickup throughout town after the killing and even visited places including his favorite cigar shop, police believed Lynn was attempting to create the impression that Jerry remained alive. However, surveillance footage and witness testimony still confirmed Jerry was never actually with her, which severely undermined that strategy. On February 6th, Lynn was expected to complete the final stage, and that remained the most puzzling aspect of the entire investigation. Since she still refused to confess what she had done, detectives presented their own reconstruction of the events. According to their theory, Lynn planned to leave Jerry's pickup beside that bridge because it was a well-known fishing location. Afterward, she planned to report him missing, expecting police would determine that Jerry had fallen into the river and drowned, or that another similar accident had occurred. However, when she stepped out of the truck, detectives believed Lynn slipped along the wet embankment and tumbled beneath the bridge, which explained how she suffered all those injuries. That left her genuinely unable to climb back up or return home. Consequently, the only option remaining was hoping somebody would discover her. Yet if that occurred, everyone would immediately ask the obvious question: where was Jerry? And why was she alone in his truck deep in the middle of the woods? According to investigators, Lynn was forced to improvise. While pulling herself back toward the roadway, she invented the story involving Dave and the boat sale. At least that portion contained some truth. She and Jerry genuinely had been attempting to sell the boat for weeks, but there was absolutely no trace of Dave. No physical evidence, no digital footprint, nothing. Nevertheless, lying there across the soaked ground with multiple broken bones, Lynn apparently couldn't think of anything more convincing. Therefore, she told police the kidnapping story and continued repeating it despite every contradiction. Eventually, even her own sons became persuaded that she had murdered their father. The trial started 2 years later in 2011, and the defense failed to present any persuasive arguments supporting Lynn's innocence. The only strategy her attorney truly pursued was highlighting the absence of direct evidence proving Lynn herself had fired the fatal shot. However, to the jury, the conclusion was unmistakably clear, and they found her guilty. Before sentencing, her sons asked to speak to their mother in court. One of them couldn't utter a single word while looking at her seated at the defense table. The other declared, "You are a monster, and I hope while you spend the rest of your miserable life rotting in jail, maybe sometime during that time, you'll think about the pain and the suffering you have caused everybody else by your actions. And then I hope you burn in hell." In the end, the judge sentenced her to life imprisonment without any possibility of parole for at least 25 years, meaning she would already be in her 70s before becoming eligible to apply. As of now, she remains incarcerated under that sentence. Even today, she continues insisting she is innocent, but at this stage, she has virtually no realistic chance remaining to overturn the conviction. As for Jerry, his remains were ultimately buried with military honors only 2 months after his wife received her sentence. That was more than 2 years after he was murdered. Five-year-old child disappears without a trace, but nobody submits a missing person report for an entire 2 years. Inside the sealed confines of a deteriorating Chrysler Sebring, Adam Montgomery was not looking for his daughter Harmony. He was transporting her decaying remains from the vehicle's trunk into a ceiling vent, then later into a commercial freezer, while carrying on with everyday routines, purchasing groceries, and sharing laughs with his wife as a dead body rested only inches away. This is far more than an account of a father's fury. It is a forensic examination of the mechanics of evil, where an innocent child became little beyond a discarded suitcase in the existence of a man who exchanged compassion for a permanent place within darkness. Adam Montgomery was someone whose course through life appeared shaped by abandonment and the sharp fractures of a failed system. Born in 1990, he did not come into a world of dependable stability. His upbringing was marked by constant movement and early exposure to unpredictable conduct that would eventually harden into his own character. Before reaching adulthood, he had already perfected the practice of manipulation, an ability he employed like an instrument of harm. His criminal history expanded with convictions spanning assault and weapons violations, reflecting a man who regarded the law as an inconvenience instead of an authority. His relationship with Crystal Sorey, Harmony's biological mother, brought together two deeply unstable lives. Their connection formed through mutual battles with substance abuse, producing a relationship driven by intensity instead of stability. When Harmony arrived in 2014, she was born into circumstances already collapsing beneath their foundations. Almost from birth, the little girl became trapped within an ongoing cycle of foster care and parental instability. The Massachusetts Department of Children and Families controlled the direction of her future, and its intervention, or failure to intervene, would ultimately face nationwide scrutiny. Despite Adam's well-documented record of violence and his failure to secure stable housing, the court and child welfare systems made several consequential decisions. During early 2019, the courts awarded Adam full physical custody of Harmony. The decision left many observers bewildered, particularly because Harmony had allegedly been flourishing within her earlier foster homes. Her mother, Crystal, had already lost custody, while Adam, projecting the image of a man prepared to rebuild his life, assumed the position of sole caregiver. He carried the title of father, yet the truth stood worlds apart from any promise of safety. Adam drifted through life with a level of coldness that left him unmoved by the needs of a 5-year-old child. Harmony was an energetic, wide-eyed little girl who had experienced greater upheaval in 5 years than many individuals encounter across an entire lifetime. She reached her father's home carrying quiet optimism, never realizing the man she had been expected to trust felt only bitterness toward the obligations she symbolized. In Adam's eyes, Harmony represented a barrier to his pleasure-seeking lifestyle, an unending reminder of duties he was inherently unable to fulfill. The system had essentially entrusted a defenseless child to someone who functioned with an extraordinary absence of remorse. When Adam and his household relocated to New Hampshire, he carried behind him a history of warning signs that were either overlooked or deliberately misunderstood. He devoted his days to pursuing another high, frequently leaving Harmony hidden beneath the weight of his drug-driven indifference. The atmosphere he established lacked even the most basic elements of human decency, much less the care and affection a child needs to thrive. Everything was prepared not for a joyful family reunion, but for a gradually unfolding disaster that would remain completely invisible to a society. Convinced Harmony was merely living with her father, the heartbreak lay not only in the brutality that would ultimately come, but also in the deliberate neglect shown by those entrusted with protecting her life. Adam Montgomery not only failed in his role as a father, he had already started erasing his daughter long before ending her life. To understand the environment that eventually swallowed Harmony, it is necessary to examine the poisonous relationship between Adam and his wife, Kayla Montgomery. Their marriage rested not upon cooperation, but upon shared self-destruction and mutual substance dependence. Addiction held them together as they drifted through a transient existence sustained by continuous deception. Kayla was a woman almost entirely overshadowed by her husband's controlling influence, partly a casualty of his violent temper, partly a willing participant in his everyday schemes. She remained trapped in constant obedience, frightened by his fury while equally fearful of losing access to the drugs he controlled with unwavering authority. Adam established every condition governing their lives. He controlled the money, obtained the drugs, and maintained the story that they were simply an unfortunate family struggling through hard times. For Kayla, remaining in his favor became an issue of sheer survival. She quickly learned to ignore the darkest parts of his character, exchanging her conscience for another dose. Once Harmony was thrown into this unstable household, she was instantly marked as an outsider. She embodied a lingering reminder of Adam's earlier life, an unwanted connection to a failed relationship and the past he wished forgotten. Adam and Kayla's biological children, although neglected themselves, received whatever tiny measure of patience the pair could manage. Harmony, by contrast, became the burden they blamed, the chosen target for every frustration Adam carried. By the autumn of 2019, the delicate illusion of their family life collapsed entirely. The Montgomerys were forced out of their Manchester apartment, leaving their existence reduced to a frantic search for somewhere to stay. Every layer of the social safety system failed them, mostly because Adam refused all contact with organizations demanding responsibility or sobriety. The answer he forced upon his family was one born of desperation. The entire household, 2 adults and 3 young children, began living inside a silver Chrysler Sebring. It marked a swift plunge into complete filth. They stopped in isolated parking lots behind shopping centers and industrial areas. continually changing locations to avoid police officers and complaints from nearby residents. That car became the whole of their world, a suffocating metal enclosure only a few feet wide. New Hampshire winters are brutally unforgiving. As November faded into December, temperatures regularly dropped into the low 20s and teens Fahrenheit. Within the sedan, the freezing air became an intensely crushing burden. Heat was available only when they had sufficient gasoline to keep the engine idling, something that happened infrequently. The cabin soon transformed into a suffocating nightmare, the atmosphere filled with the odor of dirty clothing, decaying fast food containers, filthy diapers, and lingering cigarette smoke. Moisture from 5 people breathing collected across the windows, hardening into a dense, cloudy coating of frost that effectively cut them off from everything beyond the glass. There was almost no room, forcing everyone to sleep sitting upright or twisted around the center console. Inside those cramped, freezing conditions, the family's physical and emotional hierarchy became unmistakably defined. Adam occupied the driver's seat, the unquestioned source of authority and control. Kyla remained in the passenger seat, serving as his quiet shield. The 3 children were crammed into the back seat, buried beneath tangled blankets and scattered garbage. It was there, inside the frozen rear of the sedan, that 5-year-old Harmony endured an exhausting psychological and physical ordeal. She lived in constant fear, endlessly trembling, and completely reliant upon a man whose resentment toward her existence steadily intensified. The strain inside the vehicle resembled a powder keg awaiting ignition, while the worsening circumstances supplied endless fuel. Adam's temper, already dangerously unpredictable, became completely unrestrained within the cramped Sebring. Deprived of dependable bathrooms and running water, the normal bodily needs of a 5-year-old became a trigger for deadly anger. Harmony, severely traumatized, freezing cold, and without any dependable routine, eventually started wetting herself while asleep. To Adam, this never represented a frightened child needing help. Within his distorted mindset, he interpreted it as a personal insult, an intentional challenge to his authority. His punishments were ruthless and immediate. He established a warped expectation that Harmony alone controlled her bladder, striking her violently without warning whenever she failed. The back seat became a place of absolute terror. Kayla observed the worsening physical violence, but stayed rooted in the passenger seat, placing her own survival and addiction above the life of her stepdaughter. She later told investigators how Adam would suddenly spin away from the steering wheel, his face twisted with uncontrollable fury, delivering closed-fist punches to the little girl's head and face. He called those attacks his bashes. Following each violent episode, silence completely consumed the vehicle. Harmony learned to endure her suffering without uttering a sound, silently absorbing the repeated blunt force blows, while everyone else acted as though the deep bruises spreading across her tiny face and body simply did not exist. The Chrysler Sebring had ceased being merely a temporary refuge for a homeless family. It had become a mobile chamber of torture. Their isolation was absolute. Although surrounded by the city, they remained completely unseen within it. And with every blow, Adam stripped away another piece of his daughter's fragile existence, racing ever closer toward an irreversible end. December 7, 2019. Morning arrived beneath gray skies and piercing cold across Manchester. Within the Chrysler Sebring, the temperature lingered around 20 degrees Fahrenheit. A heavy coating of frost covered the inside of the windows, imprisoning everyone within a dim, icy enclosure. The atmosphere inside the sedan felt suffocating, saturated with the odor of unwashed bodies, stale cigarette smoke, and the biting metallic scent of winter. Adam awoke already agitated. His body demanded the chemical balance that kept his unstable nervous system under control. He turned the ignition key, the engine coughed, started, and settled into a faint, vibrating idle, bringing the distant hope of weak heat. Across the back seat, wrapped beneath thin, dirty blankets, Harmony began to awaken. She trembled uncontrollably, drained of energy, and frozen by the terror of making any noise. The relentless cold and the lingering psychological damage from previous weeks had completely undermined her body's ability to hold on. She wet herself. The unmistakable pungent smell of urine spread through the cramped interior of the sedan. Blending quickly into the warming air, it gradually drifted from the dashboard vents. It was a small biological mishap, the unavoidable consequence of a young child surviving inside a frozen automobile without access to a restroom. Adam saw something entirely different. He interpreted the accident not as evidence of suffering, but as a calculated act challenging his unquestioned authority. He shifted the vehicle into drive. The tires crackled across the frozen pavement as he forcefully pulled away from the parking lot, heading toward a nearby methadone clinic and a fast food drive-through. Driving through the city required crossing a network of traffic lights. At the first red signal, the Sebring rolled to a stop. The brake pedal released a faint hiss. Adam placed the vehicle in park. His breathing became quick and shallow. He released his seatbelt, rotated across the center console, and exploded with rage. His heavy, unforgiving fists slammed into Harmony's face and head. 3, perhaps 4 punches. Brief, brutal. He called those assaults his bashes. The traffic light switched green. Adam jerked himself back behind the wheel, shifted into gear, and pushed down the accelerator. The morning trip descended into a horrifying pattern of violence, controlled by the rhythm of the city's traffic lights. Driving forward brought temporary, desperate relief. Stopping meant overwhelming terror. At the following red light, the brake lamps glowed brightly, lighting the exhaust clouds reflected inside the rearview mirror. The Sebring stopped once more. Adam turned toward the back again. The cramped interior left no room for a full swing, forcing him instead to drive blunt, piston-like punches directly into the child's delicate skull. Kayla remained fixed in the passenger seat, staring blankly through the cleared section of the windshield. She chose personal safety and addiction over making any effort to intervene. The noises imprisoned inside the vehicle were horrifying. The muted impact of knuckles striking bone, the groan of the worn suspension shifting beneath Adam's changing weight, the restrained, trembling whimpers of a little girl who already understood that crying aloud would only provoke even greater brutality. At the third intersection, the beating reached its worst point. Adam pressed his knee against the center armrest to increase his leverage. He unleashed one final, crushing series of blows upon Harmony's head. He hit her again and again, his expression empty except for blind, instinctive irritation. Once the traffic light changed, he faced forward again, grasped the steering wheel, and casually remarked to Kayla that he believed he had seriously hurt her this time. He expressed no remorse. Instead, he sounded profoundly annoyed. In the rear seat, Harmony collapsed against the faded upholstery. Every whimper stopped entirely. Several minutes afterward, she released a faint, guttural groan, a grim neurological reaction to catastrophic brain injury. Then came complete silence. The Sebring continued slowly along the bleak streets of New Hampshire that morning. They entered a Burger King drive-through line. Breakfast was ordered. Adam and Kayla remained in the front seats, quietly eating inside the still cabin, surrounded by the rustling of greasy paper packaging. The contrast between the vehicle's sudden silence and the ordinary sounds inside it was overwhelming. They carried on with the routine act of eating fast food while a dying little girl sat only inches behind their seats. The normalization of such horror became complete. They ate, drove to obtain their narcotics, and consumed them. Time steadily passed. The heater eventually warmed the interior, yet the back seat continued becoming noticeably colder. Sometime during the late morning, the Chrysler stopped running. The engine failed completely, returning the cabin to an eerie, frozen silence. It was there, amid the abrupt stillness of the disabled vehicle, that the reality in the back seat could no longer be avoided. Kayla leaned backward and pulled away the dirty blanket. Harmony showed absolutely no response. Her skin had begun developing a pale, wax-like appearance. Her arms and legs were stiffening while her jaw hung loosely open. The severe bruises covering her face had already deepened into horrifying shades of purple and black. She was no longer breathing. There was no heartbeat. Inside any other vehicle, with any other family, that exact instant would have unleashed absolute panic. Screaming, frantic chest compressions. An immediate, desperate call for emergency responders. Adam did absolutely none of it. He looked directly at his daughter's lifeless body. The violent anger from earlier had completely disappeared, replaced by cold, methodical calculation. He was not seeing a dead child. He saw a logistical complication, an enormous piece of physical evidence capable of threatening his freedom and cutting off his drug supply. Stepping into the freezing air, he opened the Sebring's trunk and removed a black and red Under Armour duffel bag. He climbed back into the rear seat, moving quickly, efficiently, and with complete emotional detachment. He bent Harmony's small, stiffening body, forcing her limbs inside the confined dimensions of the canvas bag. Then he zipped it closed. At that precise moment, the little girl stopped existing as a human being in her father's eyes. She became freight. Adam carried the canvas bag toward the back of the vehicle, threw it inside, and slammed the trunk shut. The hard, metallic bang echoed through the freezing air. serving as the final period upon an unbearably brief life. He returned behind the steering wheel, picked up his phone, and started placing calls to arrange a tow truck while searching for another drug supply. The Sebring's unexpected engine failure required towing. Before the recovery truck appeared, Adam removed the canvas duffel from the trunk. He neither fled into nearby woods nor gave way to panic. Instead, he casually draped the heavy bag across his shoulder and walked through the frozen city streets. The family temporarily occupied the unheated hallway of a nearby apartment building, where Adam simply threw the bag onto a snowbank outside the rear exit. For several days, local residents passed the frozen, snow-covered pile, entirely unaware a child's grave rested beneath the ice only steps from their feet. By late December, the family obtained space inside a nearby homeless shelter. Adam recovered the bag from the snow and carried it indoors, handling it like ordinary baggage. However, once the shelter's heating system warmed their small shared room, the frozen contents gradually began thawing. Concealing the remains became substantially more difficult. Adam obtained a red igloo cooler, an ordinary hard plastic container designed for summertime picnics. Inside the facility's cramped communal bathroom, he moved the remains from the canvas duffel into the cooler. He shoved the heavy plastic container into one corner of the room. Together, he and Kayla slept, ate, and cared for their surviving children only inches from the biological decomposition of his eldest daughter. The extraordinary psychological compartmentalization necessary to live inside that room defied ordinary human understanding. During February 2020, the Montgomerys relocated into a real apartment on Guilford Street. The red cooler came along with them, yet decomposition is an unforgiving, relentless biological process. Adam soon recognized the unsealed plastic container could no longer contain it. He discovered a metal vent cover attached to a ceiling duct inside the main bedroom. He forced the remains into a heavy-duty garbage bag, climbed onto a chair, and pushed the bundle deep inside the dark ventilation shaft overhead. It proved to be a disastrous mistake. The building's central heating activated, sending warm air directly across the plastic. The biological decomposition accelerated dramatically. A dense, suffocating odor gradually spread throughout the apartment. A heavy, sickly, unavoidable smell of death seeped through the drywall and drifted into the shared hallway outside. Neighbors began reporting the offensive odor coming from the Montgomery apartment to property management. Adam rushed to regain control. He bought excessive amounts of bleach, baking soda, and industrial cleaning products, frantically spreading them around the room. When the ceiling plaster started sagging and turning yellow from collected fluids, he repaired the drywall, desperately attempting to imprison the horror within the building's structure. The Guilford Street vent could no longer serve its purpose. Adam required an intensely cold location to slow the decomposition. At that point, he worked as both a prep cook and dishwasher at a neighborhood pizza restaurant. He placed the remains inside an ordinary tote bag, carried it aboard a public transit bus, and walked directly through the kitchen's rear delivery entrance. He set the tote onto a lower shelf inside the restaurant's commercial walk-in freezer, wedging it behind large boxes of bulk food supplies. For several weeks, Adam completed his work shifts. He tossed pizza dough, sliced vegetables, and regularly entered the freezing metal freezer to collect ingredients, his breath forming clouds in the icy air beside the hidden remains of his own daughter. By March 2020, concern over an approaching restaurant inventory inspection forced Adam to act once again. He carried the bag back into the Guilford Street apartment. He placed it inside the bathtub, turned the shower to full pressure, and ran the exhaust fan to disguise both the sound and odor. He used lime and various tools during a gruesome systematic effort to further destroy the physical evidence. After completing this horrific task, he rented a commercial U-Haul truck. Under the cover of darkness, he drove the large box truck away from Manchester. Before sunrise, the odometer recorded more than 130 miles. The precise path he traveled became a permanent mystery. When he returned the truck several hours afterward, the contents had disappeared forever. That very month, the global pandemic shut down the world, providing the perfect concealment for a killer. Schools shut their doors, child welfare agencies shifted toward virtual check-ins, and isolation became the global standard. Adam and Kayla repeated a calm, rehearsed lie whenever questioned, insisting Harmony had returned to Massachusetts to live alongside her biological mother. It was an effortless, uncomplicated explanation, and for an already overwhelmed child welfare system, it seemed entirely believable. Months gradually became years. By late 2021, Crystal Sori's concern had transformed into overwhelming, desperate panic. She had devoted months attempting to reach Adam so she could speak with her daughter. He had switched telephone numbers, relocated multiple times, and avoided every electronic message. Crystal launched an unrelenting, desperate effort. She contacted New Hampshire child welfare offices. She contacted the Manchester police. She emailed the mayor's office. At first, her concerns disappeared into bureaucratic indifference, dismissed as ordinary complaints from a mother who had lost custody while struggling with a difficult former partner. Eventually, her determination finally broke through the silence. During November 2021, a Manchester detective reopened the file to conduct a standard welfare check. He reached Adam, who immediately ended the call. The detective contacted extended relatives, encountering a confusing network of contradictory, evasive accounts. He examined statewide school enrollment records. Nothing. He searched regional pediatric databases. Empty since 2019. The chilling mathematics of the calendar suddenly became unmistakable to investigators. A 5-year-old girl had not simply missed a weekend visitation. She had disappeared entirely from every system. Nobody had seen Harmony Montgomery for 730 consecutive days. The realization that a human being had vanished in plain sight launched an aggressive, retrospective search. By the winter of 2021, the trail had effectively turned to stone. Detectives found themselves pursuing a ghost. Investigators began with the father, finding him asleep inside a vehicle beside a new girlfriend. His life remained an endless, uninterrupted cycle of transient addiction. Once escorted into the sterile interrogation room beneath harsh fluorescent lights, his behavior remained disturbingly emotionless. He delivered investigators a polished, rehearsed account, insisting he had driven the child back to her biological mother in Massachusetts, shortly after Thanksgiving 2 years earlier, and had not seen her again. He volunteered no additional information, showed no genuine alarm, and quickly requested an attorney. He stood as a solid wall of sociopathy. The investigation's opening stage collided with a carefully constructed maze of intentional deception. Family members and former acquaintances supplied inconsistent, deeply compromised timelines. One relative incorrectly insisted the victim had been alive during late 2019. Another mentioned uncertain stories about state agencies assuming custody. Detectives devoted thousands of investigative hours pursuing these manufactured illusions across multiple states. They subpoenaed historical cellular tower records and searched digital evidence that produced nothing except dead ends. Every clue became a calculated illusion intended to exhaust investigative resources. The biological mother's desperate claims were ultimately confirmed. Yet investigators remained 24 months behind a predator who had painstakingly erased his trail. After the truth reached the media, an overwhelming wave of horror swept across the city. Missing person posters covered bare winter trees, convenience store windows, and chain-link fences lining major roadways. Throughout the community, the atmosphere grew heavy beneath crushing collective guilt. Residents struggled with one disturbing question. How had an entire network of teachers, neighbors, shelter employees, and child welfare agencies failed to recognize the absence of a child? Public anger spilled into the streets, directed squarely at the systemic breakdowns within the child welfare system that had unknowingly approved the deadly living situation. Candlelight vigils gathered beneath the bitter winter sky, tiny flames flickering against the bleak portrait of institutional failure. Public horror deepened after revelations about the restaurant freezer emerged. Residents agonized over knowing they had casually purchased meals from a business concealing such a horrifying, decaying secret, only steps away from its food preparation area. Recognizing the principal suspect's impenetrable emotional detachment, investigators deliberately shifted attention toward the weakest person within his circle. The stepmother was taken into custody, initially not for murder, but instead on welfare fraud charges. Forensic accountants uncovered a devastating financial trail. For more than a year following the victim's death, the accomplice illegally continued collecting food stamp benefits assigned to the missing child, directing thousands of dollars toward their daily drug expenses. Investigators used that financial offense to separate her from Adam, placed inside a county jail cell, deprived of narcotics, and entirely removed from her husband's psychological influence. Her carefully maintained composure quickly began unraveling. The interrogation became a relentless, systematic dismantling. Detectives maintained constant pressure while exposing the impossible mathematics within her earlier accounts. They capitalized upon her severe drug withdrawal and deeply rooted fear of the primary suspect. Eventually, the barrier collapsed. With her voice shaking, she described the horrifying mechanics behind concealing the remains. She traced the terrifying timeline, beginning inside the frozen Chrysler Sebring, continuing through the snowbank, the red cooler at the homeless shelter, the ceiling vent on Guilford Street, and finally, the walk-in freezer at the pizza restaurant. She revealed the grim location of an architectural grave. Equipped with this devastating guide, crime scene specialist entered the Guilford Street apartment during early 2022. The unsuspecting current tenants were evacuated immediately. Investigators covered the primary bedroom with thick plastic sheeting before methodically dismantling the room. They removed the metal ceiling vents and employed power saws to remove substantial portions of the surrounding drywall. Within the narrow, dark ventilation shaft, the forensic evidence proved chemically unmistakable. Testing swabs reacted immediately to human decomposition fluids deeply absorbed into the structural wood. Sophisticated DNA testing verified the biological profile matched harmony. The immense quantity of forensic residue preserved inside the ductwork confirmed the accomplice's account with remarkable precision. The offensive odor neighbors had reported months before finally received a scientific explanation. Investigators then redirected their forensic attention toward the final stage of disposal. Investigators obtained the rental records for the commercial box truck secured during March 2020. The odometer reading became the most intimidating figure in the entire investigative file. 133 miles traveled between midnight and daybreak. Detectives calculated the range, dividing the mileage to establish an approximate 66-mile search radius extending beyond the city's boundaries. They recovered archived, low-quality surveillance recordings from toll plazas positioned along the turnpike. Infrared cameras documented the large truck moving through the toll lanes during the middle of the night. Only one silhouette occupied the driver's seat. The resulting search area proved overwhelmingly enormous. It stretched across dense, unforgiving New England forests, tidal waterways, and commercial waste processing facilities, where industrial dumpsters had already been crushed, burned, or buried beneath thousands of tons of municipal refuse during the previous 2 years. Detectives deployed K-9 teams specially trained in human remains detection to search frozen wetlands and remote access roads. Ground-penetrating radar scanned isolated dirt trails. Nevertheless, the harsh realities of time and weather worked entirely to the killer's advantage. Detectives summoned the primary suspect for another interview, hoping the overwhelming weight of accumulating evidence would provoke one decisive mistake. They presented toll booth photographs, DNA findings recovered from the ceiling supports, and extensive transcripts documenting his wife's confession. His response remained an unsettling emptiness. He looked directly at investigators with eyes completely lacking fear, regret, or emotion. No breaking point ever arrived, nor did any emotional confession suddenly emerge. He approached the questioning with the same deadly irritation he had displayed inside the front seat of the frozen sedan. He measured every move for survival, conserved his strength, and kept his victim's final resting place permanently sealed within the darkest corners of his mind. By February 2024, the justice system finally trapped the primary suspect. Yet the man who had exercised complete, merciless control inside a freezing Chrysler Sebring revealed himself as a coward when confronted with responsibility. He refused to enter the courtroom. Remaining inside his jail cell by choice, he lacked the courage to face the jury or acknowledge the forensic evidence exposing his brutality. Despite his absence, the trial unfolded as a methodical dismantling of every falsehood he had constructed. The prosecution's key witness then testified, clearly shattered. His estranged wife provided a devastating hour-by-hour description of the deadly assault and the horrifying concealment afterward. She recounted the closed-fist blows at traffic lights, the canvas duffel bag, and the shocking use of the restaurant freezer. The defense tried portraying her as the true mastermind behind the crime, a desperate addict redirecting responsibility. However, the structural damage inside the apartment vent and the rental truck's precise mileage firmly tied her testimony to objective evidence. The jury required little time to understand the horrifying sequence of events. Deliberations proved brief and decisive. They quickly returned with a guilty verdict on every charge against the absent defendant: second-degree murder, second-degree assault, witness tampering, and falsifying physical evidence. Although a life sentence followed, the outcome remains profoundly hollow. The regional child welfare system emerged deeply damaged, compelled to confront painful public scrutiny over vulnerable children disappearing through bureaucratic failures. The city continues carrying lasting emotional scars. Even today, Harmony's physical remains have never been found, completely consumed by the vast machinery of commercial waste. She remains a ghost, forever imprisoned within the cold, deliberate machinery of her father's cruelty.
Again, with new information on a grisly discovery, a body found in a barrel floating in San Diego Bay.
Just a short time ago, NBC7 spoke with the man who first spotted the barrel.
We start with breaking news out of Chula Vista, where months after a man was found dead in a barrel in San Diego Bay, police have made arrests.
Chula Vista, within California's San Diego Bay region, September 30th, 2017. 28-year-old Omar Medina was enjoying a rare day off exactly as he preferred, visiting his mother and relatives who had traveled into town. Omar's sister Alicia explained that growing up in a single-parent household had been difficult. Yet those challenges created an incredibly close and unique connection within their family. To Omar, family meant absolutely everything. As the youngest child, Alicia described him as a quiet boy who was deeply considerate and highly perceptive. He had an older brother and sister and cherished being an uncle to their kids. He dreamed of having children himself and hoped his siblings would become aunts and uncles just as he had, constantly searching for opportunities to help others, especially his mother, whom he called several times every day. Omar received slightly more than $80,000 after winning a legal settlement. The very first thing he did was write checks to family members, immediately giving his mom $10,000 without hesitation. Omar earned a living with a scaffolding company, although music had forever remained his true passion. He had never attended a single lesson because every skill was learned independently. He mastered several instruments and also created his own music. "One day I'm going to win a Grammy," he often declared. The scaffolding business belonged to a man named Greg Cook, who genuinely became Omar's mentor. Greg found him employment, arranged an account so he could manage the settlement funds, and even sold him a vehicle. Greg's brother, 53-year-old Timothy, offered to rent Omar an outbuilding on his property. Although it lacked plumbing and any kitchen facilities, it provided somewhere to sleep, which suited Omar perfectly. He could access the main house whenever necessary and play his music at whatever volume he pleased. During the summer of 2017, Omar moved there. However, while saying farewell to his mother that September afternoon, Alicia and her daughter, who lived in the same apartment complex, also came by. Alicia recalled sensing an unusual nervousness in her brother's behavior. He appeared uneasy and unsettled. She noticed his car packed with boxes. Omar explained that he was moving out, although he still had nowhere else to go. He had only recently settled there, but the arrangement had obviously failed, and Timothy had told him he needed to leave. Alicia recommended staying with their mother temporarily, but Omar replied that the house was already crowded. Everything felt too hectic, and he refused to place additional strain on anyone. He reassured Alicia that everything would work out because he was always okay. Promising to stop by her place later for a proper visit, Omar drove away while Alicia headed out to see a movie. Several hours later, Alicia returned home, but Omar had never arrived, and nothing suggested he had visited either. She texted him, and although the message was marked as received, no response came. Roughly an hour afterward, she sent another text, but this one was never delivered. She couldn't shake the strange feeling in the pit of her stomach, yet her brother was in the middle of moving. He had work, an active social life, and countless things keeping him occupied. There were plenty of perfectly reasonable explanations for why he hadn't replied immediately, or so she believed. The next day, Alicia received a phone call from her mother. "Have you heard from Omar?" The uneasy feeling she had tried convincing herself to ignore immediately returned because there was simply no chance he would deliberately avoid his mother. Alicia contacted Timothy, who told her he had seen Omar the night before when he returned to collect more belongings. According to Timothy, Omar appeared intoxicated and, honestly, seemed completely scattered. Every possible scenario crossed the family's minds, including the possibility of a traffic accident, especially if he had been drinking. The moment 48 hours had passed, they officially reported Omar missing. The dispatcher was supportive and completely straightforward with the family. Omar was not classified as vulnerable because he was older than 18 and had no documented history of mental health issues. It would likely take time before search teams were deployed or warrants and subpoenas could be obtained for his banking and phone records. However, because they were immediate family, they could personally contact those companies and request the records themselves, which would be considerably faster. Alicia recalled stepping into the role of investigator. Although frightened and overwhelmed with emotion, she pushed those feelings aside and focused on doing everything she possibly could. She organized teams of volunteers, divided them into groups with flyers, and ensured every road was searched thoroughly. She also followed the dispatcher's recommendation and contacted Omar's cell phone provider. She successfully obtained his phone records, but frustratingly, they showed no incoming calls after September 30, the final day anyone had seen him. Eventually, investigators visited both his former residence and workplace. Omar had been staying at 526 McIntosh Street in Chula Vista with his roommate, 53-year-old Timothy Cook. Where Omar had relocated, or intended to relocate, remained unknown. Timothy insisted he had no idea either. Omar had been staying in an outbuilding attached to the property, and because he and Timothy were never particularly close, Timothy knew very little about Omar's personal routines or daily schedule. The condition of Omar's former room caught the responding officer completely off guard. It was badly deteriorated, neglected, and genuinely unsuitable for anyone to inhabit. One window had been shattered, the carpeting was soaked, torn up, and buried beneath debris, while large sections of drywall had been ripped away. When investigators questioned Timothy about the condition, he first explained that Omar had always been an extremely untidy person, something that frequently irritated him. More importantly, however, Timothy said he had been performing regular repairs throughout the property in exchange for discounted rent from the landlord. After Omar moved out, he simply stripped the room without giving it another thought. His explanation seemed entirely reasonable, but now that Omar was officially missing, Timothy might have unknowingly destroyed potentially significant evidence, creating serious concern. As investigators continued searching, 1 week after Omar disappeared, they located his vehicle on a street not far from his former residence. It was unlocked, and every possession Alicia had noticed when she last said goodbye to him, including his guitar and computer, remained inside. Those were items he never would have abandoned under any circumstances. The most likely explanation was that someone had expected the vehicle to be stolen by then, particularly with so many valuable belongings left plainly visible. Inside the car, investigators discovered receipts from CVS and Jack in the Box. They were able to confirm Omar had purchased a few items and picked up food. Everything appeared completely normal. Nobody seemed to be following him or behaving suspiciously, yet there was still nothing revealing where he had gone afterward. Between his former residence and the location where his car had been abandoned, only a single route existed, passing a gas station. At 4 p.m., surveillance captured his white vehicle driving by, but identifying the person behind the wheel proved impossible. October 12, 10:30 a.m., 12 days after Omar vanished. A hazard had been reported at the Chula Vista Marina. A 55-gallon drum was floating in the water after being discovered by a diver cleaning the undersides of boats. The drum had been secured shut with wire, fastened to a chain, and weighted with concrete blocks. Despite those measures, it had risen back to the surface and was drifting in the water. Authorities recovered it and removed the lid. Inside, they first noticed a brown blanket, followed by strands of hair and then a hand.
Again, with new information on a grisly discovery, a body found in a barrel floating in San Diego Bay.
Just a short time ago, NBC7 spoke with the man who first spotted the barrel, and he's giving us some new insight into this horrible story.
Yeah, so the barrel was found several hundred yards from the Chula Vista Marina off J Street and Marina Parkway. NBC7's Artie Ojeda is there with more, Artie, on what this diver had to say about all of this.
Right, Catherine, the diver is actually a boat hull cleaner who started his day at the Chula Vista Marina behind me.
Inside was a body so severely decomposed that confirming the victim's identity would require additional time. However, the advanced decomposition had very little to do with the water, suggesting the remains had stayed inside the barrel for quite some time, though not beneath the bay. Detectives contacted Alicia and asked whether her brother had any tattoos. Yes, a star on his left ankle. When investigators arrived at Omar's mother's home to deliver the devastating news, Alicia described the moment as complete despair. I don't know if you've ever heard the cry of a mother whose son has just been taken. It is the most heartbreaking sound you will ever hear. It shatters your soul. Alicia explained she was permitted to view Omar only through a protective screen, something that strangely reminded her of the day he entered the world. Seeing him through that small incubator, she simply could not comprehend how unimaginably terrible everything had become.
We have new information about the man whose body was found in an oil drum in San Diego Bay. Prosecutors say Omar Medina was stabbed 66 times.
The autopsy determined that Omar died from multiple stab wounds. His body and face bore 66 separate injuries. Detectives concluded he had been killed on September 30, 2017, then concealed inside a barrel for 10 days before being discarded into the bay. The barrel was recovered less than 24 hours after being dumped into the water. Investigators reviewed every available camera angle covering the marina from the day before it was discovered. During that footage, they spotted a small greenish-blue pickup truck pulling a little white boat behind it. The license plate could not be identified, but investigators successfully determined the truck's model. What caught their attention was that the boat had been built for freshwater fishing. It was completely unusual for the kind of vessel normally seen in that harbor. 2 individuals climbed out of the truck. Although little detail could be determined, detectives believed both men were white. One climbed into the boat, while the other walked around toward the driver's side of the truck. The truck backed up, then the boat sped across the harbor and disappeared for roughly an hour. When it came back, it was riding noticeably higher in the water, making it obvious something heavy had been unloaded, reducing its weight. The man stepped from the boat into the driver's seat of the truck, while the second man climbed out and took a seat in the rear. While some investigators examined registered owners of that particular truck model, others searched records for people who owned that style of boat, and another team returned to Omar's residence to question Timothy again. However, when they arrived, they found Timothy outside pressure, washing both the driveway and his vehicle. He was also loading numerous bags into the back. They allowed him to drive away before stopping him for a traffic violation. After opening the bags, the powerful odor of bleach immediately made their eyes sting. Investigators discovered Timothy's brother Greg owned a storage facility, so they naturally decided to examine that location as well. The very first thing they located there was the identical truck captured at the marina. Inside the truck, investigators found a Home Depot receipt dated October 10, 2 days before Omar's body was recovered. Among the purchased items were several heavy-duty brown tarps, a brush, and cleaning supplies, all bought by Timothy Cook. Footage from another store also captured him purchasing gloves. Considering Timothy's earlier explanation about repairing the property for the landlord, those purchases initially seemed ordinary. However, detectives had since learned Omar had not departed under friendly circumstances. Timothy had forced him out and had been attempting to remove him for some time. During that period, Timothy had not been reporting to work and had told his brother Greg he was far outside town, which was obviously untrue. Additional cameras near the marina captured the truck towing the boat along with the same 2 men getting out. One man, whom investigators now believed was Timothy, went inside to pay for fuel while the other remained outdoors. Phone records revealed extensive communication between Timothy and a man named Derek. A small boat matching the one investigators were searching for exactly was registered to Derek's girlfriend, and Derek's phone connected with a tower near the marina at the precise time the boat entered the water. Timothy had recruited 40-year-old Derek Spurgeons to assist with disposing of the barrel. Whether Derek actually knew what the barrel contained remained an entirely separate question.
Police told me this has been a really tough case. They've literally put in thousands of hours trying to track down a killer or killers. Now they believe they have narrowed down their focus to a few potential suspects. They still don't have a motive.
On December 13, Chula Vista police carried out search warrants at both Timothy's residence and Derek's home. When investigators entered the property on McIntosh Street, they discovered that Omar's outbuilding was not the only area completely stripped. Inside the main house where Timothy resided, the entire kitchen had also been torn apart. Several other rooms throughout the house had been dismantled in the very same manner as Omar's.
We start with breaking news out of Chula Vista, where months after a man was found dead in a barrel in San Diego Bay, police have made arrests. I'm Virginia Chung.
I'm Jason Martinez, and 10 News reporter Joe Little is live in Chula Vista with the latest on this breaking story. Joe.
Well, Jason and Virginia, I got here about 2 hours ago, and this home was full of Chula Vista police officers. Andy Ducliffe behind the camera is going to pan to the right. This home right here, Chula Vista police say they arrested Timothy Cook here in relation to the body found in San Diego Bay earlier this month. Now, this is some of the video I shot earlier this morning. You can see the police officers going in and out of the front door. The garage was open. I did not see them take anything out, but they got here at 4:30 this morning. So they had plenty of time. They had several hours to pull things in and out of this home here. We have not found out who owns this home yet or who owns these cars. And we're not really sure who Timothy Cook is just yet, but we're digging into that information right now. Another man, Daryl Spurgeon, was arrested in El Cajon at the same time at his home in El Cajon. And I'm assuming officers there in conjunction with San Diego Sheriff's Department were also involved in that arrest.
He would tell me that we are a very special family because there was no hate in our hearts. I apply this today. As my mom says, hate will not resolve anything. Hate is not the answer.
Their hearts aching at the loss of a man described as a brilliant music producer and the most humble guy you'd ever meet. Medina's family saying their hearts also break for the families of the men now sitting in jail.
Our hearts are hurting for the individuals and their family members because this is just something awful all around.
Both men face charges, Timothy for murder and Derek for acting as an accessory after the fact. According to police and prosecutors, the suspected motive was financial gain. They alleged Timothy wanted Omar's legal settlement funds, a theory that appeared supported after investigators discovered images of Omar's bank statements stored in Timothy's Google Drive. Text exchanges further revealed that, over time, Timothy had grown resentful of what he claimed was Omar's frequent alcohol use and untidy behavior around the house. Investigators believed that, in addition to those issues, a confrontation erupted when Omar returned that day to request the return of his security deposit. After Omar was killed by Timothy, $480 was deposited into Timothy's bank account, an unusual transaction considering he had recently done little besides asking his brother for money.
There were no expressions on Derek Spurgeon's face as he sat in court Thursday. He pled not guilty before the judge decided to hold him on $500,000 bail. The judge also told us to hide his face. He was arrested the day before at his home in El Cajon. Somehow, evidence led police to his house and Tim Cook's house in Chula Vista. Somerville says Cook murdered Omar Medina earlier this fall. Cook could face 87 years to life if he's found guilty. Spurgeon faces far less, only 6 years.
Both men pleaded not guilty, and despite the different charges, they were both put on trial together. Much of the evidence overlapped anyway.
Today, jurors heard opening statements in the trial for Timothy Cook.
And Barbara Lee, no one is disputing that Cook and Medina were roommates and that their living situation wasn't working out. Now, one side says that fight led to murder, but the other side says there is no physical evidence to prove that.
The prosecution had established its alleged motive: a vast amount of digital evidence, surveillance recordings, extensive indications of forensic cleanup inside the residence, and numerous false statements. According to prosecutors, the case came down to hatred, contempt, and ultimately straightforward financial greed. However, Timothy's public defender maintained there were no eyewitnesses, no murder weapon, and no physical evidence establishing that Timothy had killed Omar. She argued that Timothy was responsible for removing Omar's body because he was frightened, but exactly how Omar died and who actually killed him remained unknown. She insisted that simply disposing of a body, or even moving certain items or attempting to clean parts of a scene, did not prove someone committed the killing. Instead, he was attempting to avoid precisely the situation confronting him today.
Good morning, Eric and Stella. And closing arguments got underway shortly after 10 a.m. before taking a quick break at 10:30. Prosecutors got their chance to go first. They started by brutally describing Medina's murder. Now, closing arguments are expected to take several hours. Again, currently, prosecutors are the ones that are addressing the jurors right now, that will then later be followed by defense.
We, the people in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Timothy John Cook, guilty of the crime of second-degree murder.
Timothy John Cook was found guilty of second-degree murder. Omar's relatives requested the maximum possible sentence, not only because of Omar's death, but also in light of Timothy's lengthy criminal record, which included a 1997 conviction for attempted murder that resulted in 17 years behind bars. During the sentencing hearing, Timothy's lawyer read a prepared statement. In that statement, Timothy claimed he had discovered Omar's body, disposed of the remains, and never notified authorities because he was afraid. He continued insisting he had not killed Omar, saying instead that he completely panicked and lost control.
I know with 100% certainty that I did not murder Mr. Medina, and the Deputy DA still has not shown that I committed an act that caused his death.
But the jury did not buy that argument, nor did Medina's sister.
I'm sure your family would forgive you too. You shouldn't put them through that and telling them you're innocent when you know you're not.
He received a sentence of 56 years to life, and considering he was 54 years old at sentencing, it was virtually certain he would never again live outside prison walls. Timothy Cook challenged the sentence on appeal, but the court affirmed the original ruling. Derek's trial ultimately ended with a 10-2 jury deadlock, and instead of pursuing another full trial, prosecutors reached a negotiated plea agreement with him. Derek admitted guilt to the misdemeanor offense of unlawfully disposing of a dead body. That conviction carried a 6-month sentence. However, due to separate robbery and drug-related convictions, he ultimately would spend nearly 11 years incarcerated. He said he felt genuinely embarrassed and deeply ashamed to have become involved in something like this. Timothy has never acknowledged what truly occurred that day, so the real events leading up to it, along with what was going through Timothy's mind, remain unknown. One fact, however, is undeniable. It was a terrifying ending for a young man who was simply doing everything he could to build a future and make his family proud. Alicia said, "The best way I can describe Omar is simply through music. He was such an incredibly gifted musician. He could play almost every instrument, and music has always been a huge part of our family. I miss him whenever I hear anything connected to that sound. He was someone you could spend hours talking with, and I miss that. I miss having someone like him beside me. What is what is. What's done is done. All we can do now is keep moving forward." John Spruill. At 20 years old, John Spruill was enjoying a family vacation during his first visit to Banff alongside his parents, aunt, uncle, grandmother, younger brother, and 2 dogs. On the evening of September 2nd, 2022, he and his younger brother Josh decided to skip the family activities and spent the night bar hopping to celebrate receiving a pair of workplace promotions. Their first stop was dancing Sasquatch, but after stepping outside to vape, they were denied re-entry and headed instead to a venue known as High Rollers. Later, while making their way back toward the hotel, the brothers walked past Dancing Sasquatch once more, where Spruill paused to ask an unfamiliar man for a cigarette. That man was 27-year-old Ryden Brogdon of Priddis in Foothills County. Brogdon worked as both an artist and photographer, and fly fishing was one of his greatest passions. That evening, he was out with his friend Howard Pierce. When Spruill requested a cigarette, Brogdon declined, told him to leave, and then pushed him away. Spruill questioned what the issue was, and Brogdon immediately responded by asking whether he wanted to be stabbed. Josh intervened to stop the confrontation, but Brogdon reached around him and landed a surprise punch directly to Spruill's face. Older and noticeably taller, Brogdon quickly dominated the struggle, tossing Spruill around while repeatedly striking him and threatening to kill him. The confrontation spilled onto an empty patio, where Spruill became trapped against a picnic table after his shirt was pulled over his head, leaving him unable to see. Roughly 40 seconds into the fight, he removed a pocket knife from his pocket, the same tool he carried for work at a drilling and blasting company, and began slashing blindly with one hand while attempting to push Brogdon away with the other. He continued swinging for approximately 5 seconds and later testified before the jury that he had no idea where the knife was striking. By the time a bouncer managed to pull Brogdon away, he had suffered 19 knife wounds, including 3 fatal injuries, one piercing his neck and another damaging his lungs. From beginning to end, the entire encounter lasted only about 1 minute. Believing Brogdon's friends were pursuing him, Spruill fled and even attempted to escape by leaping from the roof of a nearby 3-story building. Without realizing Brogdon was already dying, he flagged down a police officer. Officers took him into custody and transported him to the hospital, where Howard recognized him in the hallway and shouted that he had killed his friend. Brogdon was later pronounced dead at Banff Mineral Springs Hospital in Alberta, Canada. Prosecutors charged Sproul with second-degree murder, and the trial began in Calgary during February 2025. Crown attorneys Caitlin Perrin and Michael Long maintained that introducing a knife into a fistfight could never be considered a reasonable reaction, regardless of how severe the assault became. Defense lawyers Corey Wilson and Matt Brown argued their client had endured a violent, unpredictable attack and truly believed his life was in danger. After deliberating for one day, the jury returned on March 5, 2025, with a manslaughter verdict, rejecting the murder allegation while also declining to fully accept the self-defense claim. The sentencing hearing took place that October, and it was emotionally devastating to witness. 75 victim impact statements were submitted on Brogdon's behalf, with many read aloud before the court by relative and close friends. His mother, Bev, told the courtroom that grief had become the loneliest path she had ever traveled, and that the joyful life she once knew had transformed into one she never wanted. Prosecutors sought a prison term of 5 to 6 years, while the defense requested a 2-year conditional sentence to be served at home. On December 3, 2025, Court of King's Bench Justice Johanna Price delivered her ruling, and it did not include prison. Sproul received 2 years of house arrest, followed by 2 years of probation, 240 hours of community service, and an order prohibiting him from entering Banff. Price described the matter as being close to self-defense and concluded that although Sproul used greater force than necessary, he had genuinely been protecting himself throughout the assault. She characterized the incident as a tragic death that began with a verbal dispute over a cigarette and called the case truly one of a kind. Several members of Brogdon's family left the courtroom as soon as the sentence was announced. In your opinion, was this self-defense? And do you believe the punishment was appropriate? Before you decide, consider this. A couple in Michigan tried everything possible to stop smoking cigarettes. Yet the craving somehow never disappeared, and every single attempt to smoke on an otherwise ordinary day ultimately destroyed both their marriage and their lives. Kelly Nolan. On June 22, 2007, 22-year-old Kelly Nolan, a University of Wisconsin student, spent the evening drinking with several friends in her hometown of Madison. Kelly had notably struggled with alcohol for years, frequently turning to it whenever she faced emotional hardship. Her father had died in 2006, and only 1 month before she disappeared, her stepmother also passed away. Between 2004 and 2007, Kelly received 2 drunk driving convictions, resulting in the suspension of her driver's license. She additionally served 14 days in the county jail for one of those convictions. Still, on the evening of June 22nd, Kelly intended to enjoy herself. As the night progressed, her friends decided they were ready to head home, but Kelly wanted the celebration to continue, so she separated from them at approximately 11:30 p.m. She stayed behind at a bar called the Lava Lounge on West Gilman Street, roughly half a mile from her apartment, where she continued chatting with a young man she had met there. That man later told investigators he had never known Kelly before, but the two connected at the bar and spent much of the evening talking. Based on the unidentified man's account, he planned to walk Kelly home because another customer, possibly someone she already knew, had been bothering her. Tom Paris, another bar owner and the employer of the young man speaking with Kelly that evening, remembered the guy was creeping her out. Before they left together, however, Kelly asked the young man to wait while she went to the restroom. Shortly afterward, she was observed speaking again with the same man who had harassed her that night. Tom Paris noticed they were both heavily intoxicated, and he later admitted it was foolish to leave her there after seeing her outside talking with that man again. Though he assumed they knew each other, that was the final time the young man ever saw Kelly. Once he contacted police, he supplied a DNA sample and submitted to polygraph examinations. Investigators thoroughly searched both his residence and vehicle, yet uncovered nothing. He was ultimately eliminated as a suspect in Kelly's disappearance. Kelly phoned her sister during the early hours of June 23, while still at the bar, but never made it back home that night. Nobody ever saw or heard from her again. The 22-year-old's body was found several weeks later on June 9. It was discovered in a wooded section of an elderly woman's property in the 4700 block of Schneider Drive in Oregon, Wisconsin, approximately 10 miles from Kelly's Madison home. Investigators believe she died where her body was located, and an autopsy determined the cause of death was blunt force trauma to her torso, resulting in multiple bone fractures. Some speculation suggests she may have been intentionally struck by a vehicle, although authorities have never publicly confirmed that theory. Kelly's investigation has remained unsolved since 2007, although authorities have made efforts to reopen the case over the years. When she disappeared, she was wearing jeans and an emerald green scoop neck top. Detectives continue seeking witnesses who saw her on the night she was murdered. If you have any information regarding Kelly's case, you can contact Madison Area Crime Stoppers at 608-26601-FEAR. Dana Bailey. On March 4, 1987, 21-year-old Dana Bailey telephoned her parents to tell them she had just arrived back home in State College, Pennsylvania, where she attended Pennsylvania University as a student. She had spent some time away visiting her fiancé in Washington, D.C. Relieved to know she had returned safely, her parents said goodbye before ending the call a short time later. The following day, Dana's mother chose to stop by her daughter's apartment on South Allen Street, only to discover the 21-year-old had been killed by multiple stab wounds inside her second-floor residence. Dana had suffered 6 or 7 stab wounds to her left breast, and she was unclothed, bound, and blindfolded. Investigators concluded she was murdered in her bed before being relocated and positioned atop blankets and sheets laid across the floor. Her remains could be seen through the bedroom window. Meanwhile, investigators identified the murder weapon as a steak knife taken from Dana's own kitchen. The killer had not brought it along. Initially, detectives had difficulty uncovering any promising leads. Dana was outgoing, well-regarded, and friendly. She had no known adversaries and was happily engaged. Later, however, investigators learned someone had been observing the 21-year-old's apartment from a nearby building undergoing renovations. Inside one room overlooking Dana's residence, they discovered shoe impressions matching prints recovered inside her apartment. Significantly, the 3 other apartments on Dana's floor stood vacant the night she was murdered, while her roommate was away for the evening. That discovery fueled speculation that the person watching Dana had monitored her for quite some time, understanding the residents' daily routines well enough to carefully organize the attack. Authorities concluded the unknown intruder entered Dana's apartment through a kitchen window facing the location from which he had watched her. Even after piecing together those details, interviewing dozens of people, and pursuing hundreds of investigative leads, detectives remained unable to identify whoever committed Dana's brutal murder. In 1991, another individual came forward with a tip. That person shared information previously confided to them by a man unwilling to cooperate with police because he was a wanted fugitive. Detectives subsequently learned about a potential suspect who had worked as a heating contractor during 1987. Authorities noted he would likely have known the rooftops surrounding Dana's apartment because of his occupation. The possible suspect was additionally described as a white man standing 5'10" with dark, curly hair. He drove a gold or bronze Pontiac Trans Am featuring stripes. Although detectives investigated that lead, nothing appears to have resulted from it, and whether the individual was ever identified remains uncertain. Then, during December 2003, investigators received an anonymous letter. Dana's investigation had remained inactive for years, and it finally appeared there might be a breakthrough, an opportunity for authorities to finally identify a suspect once and for all. Although the letter referenced the names of 2 people, detectives were never able to link either individual to Dana or the investigation. Authorities urged the anonymous writer to come forward so investigators could question them further regarding several statements they had made. But apparently that never happened. Dana's case remains unsolved. If you have any information concerning her death, please contact State College Police at 81-234-7150. Tammy Zawicki. During the days leading up to 21-year-old Tammy Zawicki's disappearance, she experienced ongoing problems with her vehicle. A Grinnell College student in Grinnell, Iowa, Tammy had spent the summer studying abroad in Madrid, Spain. As summer vacation approached its conclusion, she and her brother departed their New Jersey home for a road trip, returning them to their respective colleges. They planned to stop in Pittsburgh to visit relatives before continuing to Evanston, Illinois, where they would drop Darren off at his university. Tammy intended to complete the remainder of the journey alone afterward, returning to Grinnell. Throughout the trip, however, Tammy's white Pontiac broke down repeatedly. Eventually, Darren believed he had fixed the problem and they reached Illinois on August 22, 1992. After spending the night with a friend, Tammy got ready to begin the drive by herself. Darren inspected her engine one last time before saying goodbye as she departed. Tammy had barely traveled any distance before her. Pontiac started malfunctioning once again. More than 60 witnesses observed her examining the engine beneath the raised hood that afternoon near mile marker 83 along Interstate 80 in central Illinois. Authorities reported that approximately 26 motorists pulled over during that period to see whether the 21-year-old needed assistance. Tammy never reached Grinnell. She was expected to call her parents and tell them she had arrived safely, but that call never came, and after they were unable to contact her, they reported her missing. By the time authorities started investigating the disappearance several days afterward, however, her vehicle had already been impounded and could no longer be examined for fingerprints because of a broken chain of custody. Even so, the car displayed no evidence of any struggle, while her purse and camera remained inside. Before long, witnesses started coming forward. An Iowa truck driver named Robert Bullington informed investigators that he had watched Tammy climb into a gray Chevrolet Celebrity driven by a man. According to Bullington, he briefly spoke with the driver, who explained that Tammy's vehicle had overheated. Bullington then recommended the man stop at a truck stop in LaSalle, although no witnesses ever placed Tammy there. Additional witnesses reported seeing a tractor trailer parked beside the Pontiac when Tammy was last observed between approximately 3:10 and 4 that afternoon. Witnesses described the truck as having a weathered, rusty orange stripe across its middle, while its driver was a white man with dark hair, roughly 6 feet tall and estimated to be between 35 and 40 years old. Tammy's body was found on September 1, 1992. It was badly decomposed and lying beside a rural section of Interstate Highway 44 in Lawrence County, Missouri. She was identified through dental records and was still wearing the same clothing she had on when she disappeared. A truck driver discovered her remains after pulling onto the roadside, explaining at different times that he had stopped either to urinate or to secure a tarp over the truck bed before rainfall. After stepping from his vehicle, he noticed a terrible odor and soon located the body. Tammy had been wrapped inside a red blanket and stabbed 7 or 8 times. Her autopsy reported the wounds formed a circle surrounding her heart, something considered highly unusual, and concluded they were inflicted with a small, sharp instrument that caused internal bleeding. Although her clothing remained undisturbed, several reports, including one issued by the FBI, stated Tammy had been sexually assaulted before she died. Her wristwatch was absent from the scene. It played the melody of Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head and featured a green umbrella on its face. Investigators have theorized Tammy was murdered elsewhere before the offender transported her through Illinois into Missouri, where her body was abandoned 500 miles from the place she disappeared. During the days after the body's discovery, authorities created a task force consisting of 14 investigators drawn from local law enforcement agencies and the FBI. Over the following weeks, detectives identified multiple persons of interest, the most prominent being Lonnie Beerbrut, a truck driver and convicted felon who was on parole when Tammy died. He was interviewed during early 1993, and investigators learned he had given his wife a wristwatch resembling the one missing from Tammy's body. Additionally, one witness identified him as the man observed near Tammy's Pontiac on the day she disappeared, and he lived only a short distance from where her body was discovered that September. Nevertheless, investigators never established any physical connection between him and the crime. The watch he allegedly presented to his wife was never recovered, and he passed away in 2002. Several additional suspects emerged and were eliminated, but every one of them was eventually ruled out. For decades, the investigation has remained largely inactive, although podcasters, amateur detectives, and Tammy's relatives have continued searching for answers while bringing renewed attention to the case. In 2020, serial killer Clark Perry Baldwin was arrested. Baldwin committed the murders of 3 women between 1983 and 1997 across Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada. After his arrest, a retired investigator suggested Baldwin might have been responsible for Tammy's murder because her case matched the pattern of his earlier killings. However, law enforcement has maintained that he is not regarded as a suspect in the investigation. Tammy's case remains unsolved. Thanks for watching Crime Chapter 51. If you enjoyed today's cases, let us know in the comments which one stayed with you the most, and tell us where you're watching from. If you love long-form true crime documentaries, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next case.